The galaxy had lived under an illusion for centuries, a carefully constructed facade of peace, cooperation, and prosperity. The Galactic Council, a vast assembly of different species, was the backbone of this delicate balance. It held together dozens of star systems, countless planets, and more civilizations than anyone could truly count. The Council's purpose was clear: maintain the peace, resolve disputes, and ensure that the various factions of the galaxy coexisted without major conflict. The Council was proud of its work, often boasting that they had successfully kept the galaxy from plunging into chaos. They told themselves they were safe, that they were in control. They had the technology, the resources, and the alliances to ward off any threats. But there was one constant shadow that lingered in the background. One name that was spoken in hushed tones, one race that was feared and yet strangely absent: the Deathworlders. A race of terrifying, brutal warriors whose very existence was a mystery to most of the galaxy. Little was known about them, only rumors and whispers. They were said to be ruthless, their homeworld a place of chaos and untamed violence, a world where only the strongest survived. Their ships were massive, capable of destruction beyond imagination. Their technology was rumored to be far beyond anything the Council could even dream of. Yet for all their power, they had remained silent for generations. Their ships were never seen, their forces never felt. The Deathworlders had kept to themselves for hundreds of years, watching from the shadows, waiting. Some believed they had simply faded into obscurity, that their time had passed. Others thought they had no interest in the affairs of the galaxy. They were, after all, an ancient race, and their power was so great that they could afford to be patient. But few realized just how wrong they were. The galaxy's peace was nothing but a lie that was about to be exposed in the most catastrophic way. It started with a strange signal. At first, it was just a blip on the radar, an anomaly detected by one of the outer colonies. The scientists who picked it up couldn't make sense of it. It wasn't anything they had encountered before. It wasn't a distress signal, nor was it a normal communication. It was something other. The signal came from a distant part of the galaxy, deep within the region known as the Void Expanse, a place where few dared to venture. The area had long been a mystery, full of strange phenomena, dead worlds, and silent star systems. It was rumored that the Deathworlders had once resided there, but no one had ever ventured far enough to know for sure. The Galactic Council dismissed the signal as a minor glitch, something easily explained away by natural cosmic interference. But that was a mistake, a huge mistake. The Deathworlders had been waiting, observing, and now they were ready to reveal themselves. The first sign of their true power came when a single star system, nestled in the outer rim of the galaxy, was completely wiped out. No one knew exactly what had happened. The system had vanished, not in the way of a natural disaster or the collapse of a star, but as though it had been erased. No debris, no remains, just nothing. The fleet stationed near the system reported no signs of attack, no battles, no ships, just an empty void where once there had been life. The Council was in shock, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. The military sent ships to investigate, but they found nothing. The system was gone. There were no signs of the Deathworlders, no trace of their ships. The authorities quickly brushed it off as a freak occurrence, a fluke. But deep down, they knew something was wrong. The galaxy's fragile peace had been shattered, and they were too blinded by their own arrogance to see it. The Deathworlders had sent their message in the most subtle and terrifying way possible, by making an entire system disappear without lifting a finger. They weren't here to play games. They weren't here to negotiate or make deals. They were here to show the galaxy that they had been underestimated. And the galaxy, in its complacency, had ignored the greatest threat it had ever faced. The Council held an emergency meeting. Panic began to spread through the ranks as the implications of the event became clearer. The death of an entire system, without warning, without explanation, was not a random act. The Deathworlders had made their first move, and they had done so with chilling precision. Now, everyone knew the truth. The Deathworlders were not just a myth, not just some long-forgotten legend. They were real, and their power was beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. And then things got worse. A second signal, this time far stronger, far clearer, and impossible to ignore, emanated from the same region of space. The Council scrambled to interpret it, but this time there was no misunderstanding. The message was direct, concise, and chilling in its simplicity. The act is over. The Deathworlders were done pretending. They had spent centuries waiting in silence, watching as the galaxy moved further into complacency. They had watched as the Council played its games, as factions rose and fell, as warships patrolled borders, and as the lesser species of the galaxy continued to believe they were in control. The Deathworlders had been watching all along, biding their time, knowing that when the time came, they would not just return to the galaxy, they would reshape it. And the first step in that process was already unfolding. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy began to understand that the Deathworlders were not some distant myth. They were here, and they were not going to wait any longer. The galaxy would soon feel the true power of a race that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. The illusion of peace was about to crumble, and no one at all, was prepared for what would come next. The galaxy was in panic. After the Deathworlders' first move, the Galactic Council had scrambled to comprehend what was happening. Their message had been clear, though chilling. The act is over. The so-called civilized galaxy was about to face a force far more powerful than anything it had ever encountered. No one could deny it now. The Deathworlders were real, and they were no longer pretending to be part of the galaxy's peaceful facade. After the mysterious disappearance of the first star system, the Council sent their strongest fleets to investigate the region of space where the Deathworlders' signal had originated. But as the ships made their way into the void expanse, they encountered nothing but empty space, and even that felt unnerving. It was as if the galaxy itself had become hollow. There were no signs of life, no markers, and no trace of the technology that could have caused such destruction. The fleet's officers tried to stay calm, but the tension was palpable. The distance between their ships and the galactic core felt endless, and the dark, cold expanse of space made them feel like tiny insects under the microscope. They knew they were being watched. "We can't just turn back," Captain Valor said, his voice thick with unease as he stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, the Starfire. He turned to his communications officer. "Send a transmission to the Council. Let them know we're continuing our search. The Deathworlders have to be here somewhere." His words were full of uncertainty. It wasn't like them to go after such a dangerous threat so recklessly, but no one knew where the Deathworlders were hiding or what they could do next. As the fleet continued its journey deeper into the void expanse, the signals grew stronger, sharper. Something was out there. It was no longer an anomaly. It was real. But still, no sign of enemy ships. No movement. Only the eerie feeling that they were being drawn into a trap. The atmosphere aboard the fleet became heavy. People could feel the tension building, like a storm was ready to break. They were being watched. Meanwhile, back at the Galactic Council headquarters, the most senior members were scrambling to formulate a plan. The situation had escalated too quickly, and now they had no choice but to face the reality. The Deathworlders were coming. Their fleets were vast, and their power unimaginable. It was not just their military strength that the galaxy feared. It was their ruthlessness, their cold indifference to the lives of those they deemed weak. No one had ever seen them in action before, but the whispers were true. The Deathworlders were monsters, survivors of a world so brutal that even the galaxy's deadliest predators would bow before them. "We have to prepare," said High Counselor Lazara, her hands trembling as she reviewed the most recent reports. "If they destroy another system like the last one, we won't stand a chance. We must mobilize everything we have." Lazara's words were harsh, but true. The Council had never faced an enemy like this. The Deathworlders didn't care about negotiations. They didn't need to threaten. Their actions spoke louder than any words ever could. The galaxy's so-called peace was nothing but a fragile bubble, and the Deathworlders had just poked a hole in it. Now that bubble was rapidly deflating, leaving the galaxy exposed and vulnerable. Back in the void expanse, the fleet had finally reached the coordinates where the last signal had been detected. Captain Valor stood at the front of the Starfire's bridge, staring at the cold black void ahead. "Prepare for anything," he said, his voice low but commanding. Just as he finished speaking, a massive lightning storm of energy erupted from the darkness of space. In an instant, dozens of enemy ships appeared, not from the shadows, but from within the storm itself. They came out of nowhere, like specters, their dark, sleek forms glowing faintly in the dim light of the galaxy. These ships were not like any others the fleet had ever encountered. They were unfathomable in their design. Their weapons were unlike anything ever seen, their sheer presence enough to send a shiver down the spines of even the most battle-hardened soldiers. "It's too late," one of the officers murmured in disbelief. "We're surrounded." But it wasn't just the sheer size of the fleet that struck fear into their hearts. It was the methodical precision with which the Deathworlders attacked. The ships moved like predators, striking from all sides without hesitation. There was no room for negotiation, no chance to reason. The Deathworlders were here to conquer, and they didn't care how long it took. "Engage the defense systems," Captain Valor shouted, but his orders were almost pointless. The Deathworlders' weapons were devastating. A single shot from one of their ships obliterated an entire defense platform, turning it into a cloud of molten debris. The fleet's response was weak and uncoordinated. No one had time to even comprehend what was happening before their own ships were being torn apart. The battle raged on for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. One by one, the fleet's vessels were destroyed. The Deathworlders weren't just fighting. They were sending a message. "This is what happens when you challenge us," they seemed to say. And soon, there would be no one left to oppose them. In a matter of hours, the entire fleet was wiped out, and the Starfire, the last remaining ship, was forced to retreat. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. The Deathworlders had shown the galaxy just how fragile their peace was, how easily it could be shattered by a force beyond their control. Back at the Galactic Council, fear turned to panic. The galaxy was no longer the safe haven it once was. The Deathworlders were not here to negotiate or to ask for a seat at the table. They were here to reshape the galaxy in their image. The illusion of peace had vanished, and now there was nothing left but a galaxy in ruins. And in the distance, the Deathworlders were only just getting started. The end of an era had begun. And there was as the galaxy grappled with the devastation, the implications of the Deathworlders' attack began to sink in. The shockwave of their sudden assault rippled across every star system, and every communication channel buzzed with fear. The military, the civilian sectors, and even the Galactic Council, once so confident in their control, were now powerless in the face of such overwhelming force. The Deathworlders had shown no mercy, no hesitation. Their message was loud and clear. They were no longer content to stay in the shadows, hiding behind centuries of silence. The galaxy would never be the same again. On every corner of the galaxy, people were scrambling to make sense of what had happened. Thousands of ships, from the mightiest fleets to humble cargo transports, had been destroyed in an instant. The once proud Galactic Council, which had spent millennia navigating politics, treaties, and alliances, was now fractured, its leaders fumbling for answers they didn't have. No one knew what to do. They had underestimated the Deathworlders, believed their reputation to be mere myth, a story told by those who feared them. But the Deathworlders had made their move, and it was impossible to ignore. Inside the council chambers, the air was thick with tension. The room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, each one more worried than the last. High Counselor Lysara, A seasoned leader who had steered the galaxy through countless crises stood at the front, her eyes scanning the room, her face a mixture of fear and determination. The reports from the front lines had been grim. Entire fleets had been wiped out, systems lost in the blink of an eye. "We have to act," she said, her voice steady, but there was an underlying sense of urgency. "The Deathworlders have shown us that they are not a force to be negotiated with. Their power is beyond anything we've ever faced." A murmur ran through the chamber. Every species in the room understood the gravity of the situation. They had seen wars, they had witnessed destruction, but nothing like this. The Deathworlders didn't just kill, they obliterated, and they did so with an efficiency that left the galaxy in a state of paralysis. There was no question that the Deathworlders were a superior force, and that realization terrified every leader present. "We cannot defend ourselves without uniting," said Counselor Marn, the leader of a powerful military faction. He slammed his fist on the table. "We need to put aside our differences, gather all our fleets, and prepare for a counterattack. There is no other choice." But there was hesitation. Some factions were reluctant to join the effort, too caught up in their own territorial concerns to risk everything for a united front. Others doubted that a counterattack would even work. The Deathworlders had proven their might beyond any doubt, and the possibility of defeat loomed large. Outside the council chambers, a sense of desperation was spreading. The galaxy's most powerful warships were being sent to the front lines, but there was no guarantee they could stop the Deathworlders. The once impressive fleets of the council were now mere shadows of their former selves, their commanders full of doubt. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The Deathworlders were not just here to conquer, they were here to reshape the galaxy, to take back what had once been theirs. For centuries, they had stayed hidden, watching as the galaxy evolved into something they didn't recognize. But now, they were ready to take control once more. The peaceful alliances and careful diplomacy the galaxy had prided itself on meant nothing to them. The Deathworlders didn't need alliances, didn't need treaties. They simply took what they wanted. And right now, they wanted everything. As the fleets rallied, many were faced with a painful truth. The Deathworlders were not invincible, but they were too powerful to ignore. Their technology was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, and their tactics were ruthless. They had perfected the art of war, had honed it over centuries, and now they were showing the galaxy just how much destruction could be wrought in the blink of an eye. The idea of trying to match their sheer power was almost laughable, but there were those who still believed it was possible. Back at the void expanse, where the Deathworlders' ships had appeared from the unknown, another chilling development was unfolding. The first wave of their fleet had done its job, shattering the defenses of the galaxy, sending a message that they were not to be trifled with. But this was only the beginning. The Deathworlders had long since planned their next steps, and they were not about to stop now. Commander Zar, the leader of the Deathworlders' fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Titan's Wrath. His dark eyes glinted with cold resolve as he watched the galaxy unfold before him. He had been given the order to bring the galaxy to its knees, and he would see it done. "The first act is complete," Zar muttered to his officers. "Now we show them what true power is." The Deathworlders' fleet, far larger than the galaxy had ever imagined, continued to move forward, stretching farther and farther into the galaxy. Their technology gave them the ability to appear at any moment, to strike with brutal force, and then disappear back into the blackness of space. The galactic forces could only try to respond, but they were always one step behind. There was no predicting where the next attack would come from. No one knew which system would be erased next. The galaxy's response was slow, hesitant, and fractured. It was clear now that their time of peace was over, and there would be no returning to the old ways. The Deathworlders had dropped the act, and they were not just conquerors, they were the heralds of a new age, a new era of chaos and destruction. It wasn't just a war that was beginning, it was the beginning of the end of everything the galaxy had known. As the Deathworlders' fleet moved onward, their presence loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. They had decided to make their presence known, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the Deathworlders continued their campaign of destruction, the galaxy began to feel the full weight of their wrath. Entire systems fell, swallowed whole by the relentless onslaught of the Deathworlders' ships. The once mighty fleets of the Galactic Council were little more than a nuisance, their best ships shattered with a single strike. Resistance, once believed to be a simple matter of time, was proving to be futile. Each battle ended the same way: overwhelming force, and then silence. The Galactic Defense Forces were being driven back, retreating to their last strongholds. But even those were no longer safe. The Deathworlders weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting to rewrite the rules of the galaxy, to show everyone who had ever doubted them that they were the true masters of this universe. No treaty, no diplomacy, no force could stop them now. What had once been considered the most advanced military in the galaxy was now in retreat, unable to keep up with the sheer brutality of the Deathworlders' forces. Councillor Lizara, once a pillar of confidence in the Galactic Council, now found herself facing the terrifying reality that there was no more time for negotiations. With every fleet that fell, with every planet that burned, the urgency became even clearer. She had called for unity, for the galaxy to stand together against this threat, but the alliances were crumbling. There were whispers of surrender, of fleeing into the deep corners of the galaxy, and Lizara knew that the galaxy she had spent her life defending was on the brink of collapse. As the Galactic Council tried to scramble together a new strategy, the Deathworlders were moving faster than anyone could imagine. Their ships, sleek, dark, and terrifying, appeared in every corner of the galaxy, leaving nothing but ruins in their wake. Commander Zar, the Deathworlder leading the charge, was a figure of dread. Known for his brutal tactics and calculating mind, he knew that the galaxy's defenses would only continue to weaken the longer this went on. His mission was clear: to bring the galaxy to its knees before they even realized what had happened. "We have already won," Zar muttered to his closest officers as he stood on the bridge of his flagship, Titan's Wrath, watching the coordinates of the next planet they would raise. His icy eyes stared into the abyss of space, his calm demeanor betraying the violence he had orchestrated. "It is only a matter of time before the rest submit to our will. And once we have them in our grasp, there will be no turning back." But despite the overwhelming odds, there were those still willing to fight, even if they knew it was a lost cause. As the Deathworlders advanced, small pockets of resistance started to form. Smuggler fleets, rogue military units, and even some of the weaker races began to regroup, realizing that their only hope of survival was to take a stand. They had no grand strategy, no resources to match the Deathworlders' fleets, but they had something else: determination. They would fight to the last ship, the last soldier, hoping that their defiance would inspire others to rise up as well. Among these pockets of resistance was Admiral Kiravos, a battle-hardened leader from one of the galaxy's oldest military factions. Her ship, the Vanguard, was a relic of an older time, but it was well-equipped and ready for the challenge ahead. "We are not finished yet," she said to her crew as the crew members worked frantically to repair the ship. "We will strike back, if not for ourselves, then for those who can't defend themselves." The crew erupted into cheers, but the Admiral knew that this fight would be long and brutal. Kiravos was not the only one who refused to back down. Across the galaxy, leaders began to rally their people, trying to forge an alliance to stand against the Deathworlders. They had little time, little resources, but their resolve was undeniable. Every day, more systems fell, but each fall only fueled their resistance. They knew they were up against a powerful force, but they also knew one thing: the Deathworlders had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the resilience of the galaxy's people. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, there were those who would not bend. As the Deathworlders advanced further into the galaxy, they began to feel the first stirrings of resistance. It was a spark, a flicker of hope in the vast darkness of space. The Deathworlders had hoped to crush all opposition quickly, but now they faced a new reality. The galaxy was not as broken as they had thought. The death and destruction they had wrought was only strengthening the resolve of those left behind. On the battlefield, the death toll mounted, and the Deathworlders' ships began to see their first real resistance. While their technology still outmatched anything the galaxy could offer, the sheer force of will from the resisting fleets started to slow them down. The attacks were becoming more frequent, more organized. A new war had begun, one that would test not only the might of the Deathworlders, but also the spirit of those left behind. The galaxy may never be the same again. Admiral Voss whispered to herself as she watched the stars burn, her eyes hardening with resolve. But we will not go down without a fight. And so, despite the overwhelming power of the Deathworlders, the galaxy was awakening. An era of chaos had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the story of survival, rebellion, and hope. As the Deathworlders looked out at the galaxy they sought to conquer, they may have believed they had already won, but the true battle was just beginning. The illusion of peace had shattered, but something else had emerged in its place. Something far more dangerous: the will of the people to survive.